Hello and welcome to the Game Changers podcast, where you'll hear from trailblazing women across sport who do so much to drive change and challenge the status quo for women and girls everywhere. I'm Sue Anstis, and I'd like to start with a big thank you to our partners Sport England, who support the Game Changers through a National Lottery Award. My guest today is one of Britain's most successful para-athletes. Hannah Cockcroft burst onto the world stage in 2010, breaking wheelchair sprinting world records. She went on to win 2 golds at the London Paralympic Games, with 3 more at the 2016 Games in Rio and 2 in Tokyo last year. This summer, Hannah won gold in the T33-34 100 metres at the Commonwealth Games in Birmingham, setting a new Games record and completing the set with gold medals at every major athletics championships. It's no wonder that Hannah was awarded an MBE in 2013 for her services to athletics, which was followed by an OBE in last year's New Year's Honours. Hannah, that Commonwealth gold medal really was the elusive one, wasn't it? You waited a long time to complete the collection and doing it at home in the UK too. I just wonder how you felt going into the Games.
You know what? I actually felt quite a lot of pressure going into that Games. I think it was more pressure in my own head because I knew it was that elusive medal. I knew that probably be my only Commonwealth Games, so it was my only chance to get that Commonwealth gold. And it was a home crowd, so, you know, following on from Tokyo, having no crowds, I really wanted to put on a good show, and I think, I definitely put that pressure on myself. So I was having all the panics before the race, thinking I'm not ready, I'm not going to do this, but thankfully it all went right on the night.
And how did it feel? Can you take us back to how that felt as you finished there?
Oh, you know what? It's a bit of a rubbish answer, but it's just relief. I just feel relief when I get out there, and I think when you start your career, it's all excitement. You think, oh, I've done it, like, amazing. Now it is literally like, oh, phew, like another one. I've managed to tick it off the list. I've managed to do it because, you know what, the competition is getting so much harder. It's getting so much stronger. Every race is different, and obviously since London 2012, my events have changed. So London 2012, I raced the 100 metres and the 200 metres. And now at Paralympic level, I race the 100 and the 800, which are 2 very, very different events. Like, you wouldn't ask Usain Bolt to do those 2 events, but for some reason, I think I can do it. So, it's getting harder every Games, and I do just line up on the line and think, I hope I can still do this.
And you mentioned longer distances there, but you recently took part in the Great North Run wheelchair race too. So how was that for an athlete? That jump from 800 even to a half marathon.
It was a terrible idea, and I wish I'd never. No, you know what? It was really nice to get involved. It normally doesn't fit very well into my season, but with the Commonwealth Games finishing so early, I had like a month to learn how to do a half marathon. So it was even harder. This year was the worst year to do it because I haven't even been doing 800 metre training. I've literally just been focusing on the 100 metres for the Commonwealth Games. And I actually, during the race, got to about 10 miles and I felt okay. My speedo broke at 7 miles. I got to 10 and I was like, I feel all right. I think I can finish this. And I got to about 10 and a half and I genuinely just wanted to cry. Like, that half a mile made all the difference. And then it was just pain for the last 3 miles. And I think it made it harder because Melanie Woods, I was pushing with Mel, but we were actually really close in our times. And we were just pushing each other the whole way. So I don't think I was expecting a full-out race, but I got one for a full 13 miles that I definitely didn't sign up for.
I might know the answer to this question before I ask it, but a marathon, half marathon, something you might do more of in the future, do you feel?
Nope. Short and sweet.
It's very definitive.
I would like to do a marathon one day just to say that I've done it and I've ticked that box, but definitely not now. I don't think it'd be so counterintuitive to my actual events, and oh man, it'd hurt so much.
Why do it? If I can take you back to your childhood, dance was your first love really before sport. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so at 3 years old, I decided that I wanted to be prima ballerina. That was like my big dream. I was a very girly girl. I loved pink and tutus and anything like that. So yeah, I wanted to be a dancer, which is a really unrealistic aim for a girl that at that point couldn't even stand up unaided. Like, I had everything strapped to my legs. But you know what, my mum and dad they're fantastic people, and they never saw a barrier in my life. They were always like, okay, yeah, let's find a way. And you'd think most parents would just go, you know what, no, that's not realistic, you're not doing it. But my parents were like, okay, we'll make this happen. And mum went out and she researched all the dance schools in the local area, and obviously had a lot of them laugh her out of the place and just say, oh, come on, look at your little girl. She can't even stand up. How's she going to dance? And one lady called Penny Alexander, she ran a dance school in Halifax called Dance for All. And she said, you know what? I can't teach Hannah ballet. Like, no one's going to teach Hannah ballet, but I will teach her to dance. And I'm going to build this dance class. She called it Creative Dance. And she said, we're just going to invite people like Hannah or able-bodied. They can come and dance, and it's going to be a mix of any kind of dance. And if I put a move in a dance that Hannah can't do, we'll remove it from the dance and we'll go from there. So Penny was actually the lady that initially taught me to walk unaided. You know, that was her first aim, was to, get me on my feet and get me moving. So she used to come along to tumble tots with me and my mum, and she got me walking. And then I danced with Penny for 17 years. After that, I danced in shows, I danced on TV, I won awards. And mum always said, like, we have to use the word dance very loosely because everyone else was dancing and I was kind of just in a corner doing my own thing and always one step behind. But you know what? I loved it, and I never she never made me feel like I was doing it wrong or like I was out of time or like I made the dance look rubbish. Like, she just let me get on, and for my mom, it was just a really clever way of getting me to do some physiotherapy, to be fair. I think that was the whole idea. But for me, it was just a dream come true, getting on the stage and dressing up and being a part of, a group of girls that all danced. It was, I loved it. I only stopped because I started racing on Saturdays, so I had to stop and make a choice.
And you'd obviously struggled with your health from being a baby. So can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, so when I was born, I had 2 cardiac arrests within 24 hours of my birth. The first cardiac arrest left me clinically dead for 20 minutes, and then I was alive for a little while, and then my heart gave up again. And basically, doctors told my parents just not to expect very much from me, that they had no idea how this was going to affect me. I had serious brain damage following the heart attacks because of the amount of time that I was not breathing for. And yeah, that was the guidance that mum and dad got. Like, whatever you get is going to be the best you get. And it did. It left me with several areas of brain damage, and then also damage to my nerve endings. So then that led to weak hips and deformed feet and deformed legs, and also problems with my fine motor skills. So I can't tie my shoelaces. I have really messy handwriting. It's quite hard for me to write. And yeah, I guess when you've got a list like that, it doesn't really give you very much to go off, does it?
And how did those challenges with that disability affect your everyday life as a young child?
I think as a young child, you know what, I never really, growing up, noticed it. Everyone just treated it like that's Hannah, like that's how Hannah does things. And I grew up, I've got 2 brothers, one older, one younger. Obviously, my younger brother's he's always known me as this, so he's always known life with a disabled sister. And so he's literally like my first-hand man. Anything I can't do, Daniel does. And it's so nice. Aww. We've travelled all over the world together. We went to Tokyo together to race just before the Paralympic Games. He almost knows to do something before I've even asked him or need to do it. And I think that's just how I grew up. Like, everyone was one step ahead of me at all times. They knew what I needed. They knew what would make me do it. So I never actually noticed that I couldn't really do things, which was, I guess it's a luxury for a disabled person to feel like that. I hated my wheelchair growing up. I hated it. I refused to touch it. I refused to sit in it. And it was ultimately because I didn't know anybody else in a wheelchair. I didn't know anybody else with a disability. I was in a very able-bodied world, and I wanted to be like everybody else, as everyone does. Everyone wants to be like everybody else. So mum and dad kind of worked around that. I was in a pushchair until I was 10. I got carried. I just opted to get carried. I'd hold on to people's hands, anything so that I didn't have to sit in a wheelchair. So
you did have a wheelchair at home that was available to use, but...
Yeah, I had a very big, heavy, I couldn't push it myself wheelchair. And I think that's what put me off. I've always been quite an independent person. I've always been brought up to be quite, I'm going to do this myself. Mm. And when I sat in that wheelchair, I couldn't do it myself. So, you know, if it was a distance that I couldn't walk, then yeah, I would just get someone to carry me, or I'd find any other way to not sit in that wheelchair. I think I was a nightmare child, to be fair.
And I've heard you say that growing up, you felt like there was nobody else like you in your world, which feels so isolating. And I guess as a mother thinking of your children too, how did you even process that as a young child?
Yeah, I guess when you're growing up in a world like that, where you don't, I didn't have any friends that had disabilities. Mum and Dad didn't know anybody who had a disability. The TV didn't show it. It was not in any magazines or anything. There was no coverage of disability, and definitely not the Paralympic Games. So it was really, really lonely. And I have just before my 5th birthday, my mum had a friend in America, and he rang my mum and said, they've just released this Barbie doll in a wheelchair. It was called Share a Smile Becky doll. I think it'd be great for Hannah. And my mum was like, okay, I'll see if they do them here. And they didn't release them in the UK at all. So my mum wrote to Toys R Us in America and just said, I have a 5-year-old. It's just about to be her 5th birthday. She refuses to use her wheelchair. She hates it. She thinks she's the only person in the world with a disability, and she loves Barbie. Is there anything you can do to get one of those dolls to be like, I'll pay anything. So yeah, for my 5th birthday, Toys R Us sent me a Share a Smile Becky doll. And I mean, it must have been a slow news day because it made all the local news. But I actually have a clip from, I think it's like ITV Calendar. And it's me saying, a 5-year-old me saying, oh, now I have Barbie, I'm not alone anymore. And actually when it got dug out of the archives like last year, just one of the journalists just sent it and said, oh, have you ever seen this? And I'd never seen it. And it actually made me tear up. Like, the girl on the screen wasn't me. It wasn't who I am today, and I don't remember feeling like that. But obviously to sit on telly and actually say that's heartbreaking. I would hate to see that on TV now, but it's obviously how I felt. And yeah, this Barbie doll was my reason to sit in a wheelchair and to feel okay with it. It's mad that a doll had to make me do that. But
it shows the power of it, doesn't it, really? I did see that clip. I'll share a link in the show notes too, because it is so emotional. And how amazing that your mum, I love your mum, that your mum work so hard to go and, make that happen for you, that clearly then did have that impact.
Oh yeah, my parents are amazing. I think, like you said, as a mum yourself, you do anything. You do absolutely anything to make your child feel welcome and feel part of the world. And yeah, I guess she obviously noticed that it was hard. And I think when you're so young, you don't notice, the authorities wanted me to go to a special school, and my parents fought tooth and nail saying, there's nothing academically wrong with her. She can learn. She just can't walk very well. Like, she's really clever. She'll do everything you want. Just give her a chance. And they fought so hard to get me into mainstream school. And then, I went on and just did really well in my GCSEs and my A-levels, and it's crazy how my legs were deciding what kind of academic studies I could actually do. It was mad.
And as you say, you grew up in that very able-bodied world of school, but what was sport like at that school?
I didn't do sport at school. Sport for me was sitting on the side and watching. It was sitting in the library reading a book. Primary school, my one day of sport a year was sports day. They brought in a race called the crab race, which was basically crawling sideways, and I was really good at it, and I always won. So that was my one PE lesson a year, was crawling sideways down the field. I used to love it. And yeah, secondary school was slightly different. Kind of the first year was the same as primary. Hannah doesn't do sport, and I had this one amazing teacher called Mrs. Daniel, and she just kind of said, no, this isn't right. She can do these things. So she brought in the local wheelchair basketball team to do a demo for the rest of the class, and that was my first ever taste of Paralympic sport. It's the first time I ever met another disabled person, and I was 12 years old, so pretty old by that point. And yeah, it just blew my world wide open when she did that. I obviously met the coach, ended up playing for that basketball team for 6 years. And then from there, school kind of started to realise, I wasn't asking to do cross country. I didn't want to go running around muddy fields. I'm not crazy. But little small adaptations could be made so that I could join in with some things. So that's kind of where athletics started for me. My teacher, Mrs. Daniels, she she said, well, everyone else is standing up and throwing a discus, throwing a shot put. We're just going to bring a chair outside and Hannah will sit down and do it. And, you know, from there, they just started to realise that it's not that difficult to get disabled people involved. We're not asking you to reinvent the wheel. We're asking you to make a very small adaptation. And yeah, it was such a small thing that you kind of look back now and think, why did no one think of that sooner? Why did it take so many years for me to be involved? But I think until that point, just mum and dad had fought so hard to get me to where I was. You kind of have to pick your battles, don't you? But yeah, that sitting in that chair on PE and throwing the discus was the start of everything you see today, really.
And what are things like in schools now for disabled children in Britain? Are they much better?
You know what? I feel like it really depends. I think they are getting better, mostly because you can now see things like the Paralympic Games openly on the TV. So disabled children know what's on offer for them. They know what they have the opportunity to do. And that kind of gives you that little bit of a push when you're a parent to go, actually, you know, we know this is an option. They can do this. But I still visit schools, especially primary schools, where you go in and they say to me, I don't do PE, I'm not allowed to do PE. And then you kind of have to bring the teachers to one side and say, look, like, there's the tiniest thing you can do to make them feel involved. It doesn't have to be the lesson that you're running. Just be creative. Just think outside of the box. So yeah, I think things are improving, but there's still so much further they could go.
And you talked about discus. That's fantastic. It's about finding athletics and track and field. So what was the next stage? When did you first find wheelchair racing?
So when I was 14, I got invited to a big UK event. It's called the School Games. It's run by the Youth Sport Trust. They're a fantastic charity. It's like a junior Commonwealth Games because the teams are merged. They're able-bodied and disabled athletes. So I got invited along to that to represent Yorkshire and Humberside in the seated discus. I won a silver medal there for Yorkshire. And that's the first place that I saw wheelchair racing. So off the back of that, Youth Sport Trust said, you know, are you interested? Do you want to go to a come and try day? And at that point, I just said yes to everything. As soon as I found sport, I just said, yeah, I'll try it. You know, I tried through the basketball club, I tried wheelchair rugby and wheelchair tennis. And then through Youth Sport Trust, I tried wheelchair racing. And I just, you know, I was 15 years old at this point and I just instantly loved it. I just instantly fell in love with the speed of it, with the independence, you know, going out. And I think for me, it was the being out there and no one could help you once you were out there. I'd lived 15 years of my life always avoiding a wheelchair, holding someone's hand, asking for help, needing the help. And when I got in that wheelchair, that racing wheelchair, I just felt free for the first time. Just felt this sense of freedom that, you know, I could go as quick as I wanted. I could go for as long as I physically could. No one could tell me to slow down because the whole point is going quick. And I didn't have to stop. You know, there was no end to the court. There was no end of range where I could throw it to. So yeah, literally that was me. Like I had the come and try day. The following week, I was up at Tanny Gray Thompson's house, getting a coach and getting a race chair and getting everything. And that was me. I've literally done it every week since. Every day since, probably.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. That's so lovely. I love that description of the freedom and the speed. You know, you articulate that so well in terms of what that gave you, that first experience too. And I love that we've had Sue Campbell and Ali Oliver from the Youth Sport Trust have been guests on the Game Changers too. So yeah, big fans of the Youth Sport
Brilliant
Trust.
Brilliant women.
And fantastic charity. So from that experience of enjoying that and obviously meeting Tanny too, when was your first proper race? When did you start taking it more seriously?
So my first proper race was actually the following year. I went back to the School Games as a wheelchair racer.
Oh, wow.
And I remember it because I lined up against all the girls that I'd watched the previous year and I beat them all. So it was great.
And you had this incredible rise too. And I watched your races from 2012 and you were so far ahead of the opposition. So what do you think made you so incredibly successful so early? Was it pure raw talent or your fitness and power?
I think a lot of it was just hunger. I have this inbuilt thing where if someone tells me I can't do something, I will absolutely go out of my way to prove them wrong. And I think 15 years of just being told you can't do sport, they just built up because I always had a love of sport. You know, my younger brother's a really keen rugby player, so he played from the age of 6. And I used to go along and watch every rugby game and just sit on the side and just think, oh, I wish I could be part of a team. I wish I could have that kind of, I don't know, camaraderie with that group of friends. And then when they won a match, I wish I had something that I could celebrate that way. And I never had that outlet. So as soon as I found it, and as soon as I found something that I was good at, I think I was quite good quite quickly. But as soon as I had that, I just wanted to make the most of it. And I think a lot of it is down to, you know, as well, Tanny and her husband Ian. So Ian was my first coach, and they didn't take it easy on me. Like, they were like, if you want to do this you're going to have to put the time in, and you're going to have to work hard. Like, there's no skipping sessions, there's no half-hearting sessions. Like, this is what we do. So my first ever training weekend, literally the weekend after I'd done that come and try, they had me out on the roads pushing like 10 miles. Like, and there was no question about it. It was like, if you want to do this, you're going to do it. And so I think right from the beginning, I was taught, like, if you want to be good, you put the time in, you put the effort in, you work hard. And then when you've just had that inbuilt from the start, that was what every session was then. I think, you know, when you start a sport, a lot of it is like, I'm just going to go and enjoy it. Whereas I started the sport and it was like, I'm going to be good at this. I'm going to be good at this. So yeah, I think, you know, 2007 was when I first sat in the race chair. 2008 was that first race. And then 2010 was my first world record. So it all went quite quick, but I just built it into my life straight away. You know, as soon as we'd taken that chair away on that first weekend, I was training, you know, every day before school, every day after school, weekends. Mum and Dad were having to pick me up in lunch breaks at college to take me to training. Just whenever we could fit it in, that was me. And at the time, it was just, I love this. I want to constantly do it. It wasn't even like I'm going to work hard. It was just like, I love it. I love the feeling of being in that race chair. So yeah, I just wanted to do it all the time. I guess it's like a video game, but a healthier one.
A real passion and addiction to it, isn't it? And so much is said about the impact of London 2012 for Paralympic sport. But when you think back, what are your biggest memories from that event?
Oh man, London 2012 is like, if I could go back to any time in my life, I would pick that every day. And I think I will for my whole life. I think you can add anything and I'll still pick London 2012 because it was just incredible. I remember going into the village for the first time. I was only 20 when I went to my first games, so I had no idea what to expect, to be honest. And I just remember going into the village and everything was so big and so new and so exciting. And we got like taken on a little show around, and they took us in the food hall for the first time. And I genuinely don't think any athlete will ever be able to explain to anyone who hasn't been in it just how exceptional food hall is at an Olympics or
It is funny because I have had real privilege to talk to many athletes, Olympians and Paralympians, and so many of them do talk about the food hall.
It's just so big and there's so much choice. And I just remember sitting there and thinking, oh man, I can get a Sunday roast at 2 a.m. if I want it while I'm here. That is an overwhelming, like, it's a massive pitfall for a lot of athletes. You have to have a lot of self-control. I also remember just sitting there and thinking, I have never seen this many disabled people in my life. And it sounds stupid. You're at the Paralympic Games, of course you're going to be surrounded by disabled people, but I think just when it still feels so new. I'd been in the sport like 5 years at that point. I'd been to one World Championships, but other than that, I'd only done like local national championships. So there was still like a limited number of girls that you raced against. So you were only competing against girls in Britain. It was just such a wow moment, just such a, I can't believe I'm here. And then you just wandering around the village. Like, the village was incredible. And then I think my other overriding memory is we used to go down and train at the warm-up track. So I remember the day before my race, we were training on the warm-up track. I was with my coach, Peter Eriksson was my coach for 2012. And I could hear this noise and it just sounded like quite a loud buzzing. You know, like when you can't tune a radio in? That's what it sounded like. I just turned to Peter and I went, what is that noise? It's driving me insane. And he just went, Hannah, that's the crowd. You should probably get used to that. And I just remember thinking, like, we're not even in a stadium. How can we hear the crowd? We're quite far from the stadium. And it just, it terrified me a little bit, but also made me just so excited that I was going to get the chance to go out in front of that, and I was going to, get the chance to race in front of that, because I quite like attention, so it worked quite well for me.
and from London 2012, you went on to have incredible success. So you're unbeaten for 7 years, I think. And as you mentioned earlier, the IPC like to change the events for major championships. So clearly frustrating when your favourite distances, as you said, at 200 and the 400 metres were removed from Paralympic categories. How are those decisions made? Who makes those decisions?
So the International Paralympic Committee make them by themselves. I genuinely think they made that decision because they didn't want the same athlete winning both races. So they put the offer out of a sprint and a middle distance. But I had other ideas, and I really didn't want to do the 8. When it was announced, I was like, I'll just do the 1. Not interested in the 8. And by that point, I'd changed to my current coach, Jenny Banks. And Jenny was like, no, you don't get to make that decision. You're doing both. So that was argument over. She just told me what I was doing, and I did the work. And the work was hard. It was really hard to learn how to do an 800 metres. It's so different to anything else. And it's so far. I still find it such a long way. But we just worked on it. We still had the 100 and the 200 at the 2013 World Championships, so I could go there, I could just be a sprinter, but we were already working on the 800 metres at that point. And then Swansea, the European Championships in 2014, was my first 800 metres. And it was me and my teammate at the time, Mel Nichols. We were like the front runners, but Mel actually preferred the middle distance to the sprint, so she'd been working on this for years, like this was her favourite event. And I just remember Jenny saying, right, all you have to do is sit behind Mel and just sprint at the end. So that's exactly what I did. And I just remember when I did it, Mel swore at me so loud, but I was like, sorry, I don't know how to race this event. Thankfully, I've got a lot better since then, and I do my own work now, I promise. But we had to do a few dirty tactics to learn it.
That's fascinating, isn't it, in terms of the classification and the decisions on races and so on. So it's not the same for male and female, like it's done?
No, so the men in my classification I think they have the 100, 400, 800, so they actually even have more events. I guess with the Paralympics, there's so many classifications, there's so many events that could run, that the IPC have to then select, I guess, which ones are going to be the strongest events to run, so who's going to enter the most events, but also try and make as many Paralympic champions as possible. But I ruined their plan.
And what's the gender equality like in Paralympic sport? You see the same number of events?
Yeah, I'd still say the women are a little down. So the new Paralympic programme for 2024 has actually just been announced, and they have actually increased the number of women's events quite substantially, which is exciting. So, for example, they got rid of the T33 men's 100 metres and they put a women's T33 100 metres in instead, simply because the men's event didn't have enough numbers. So, fingers crossed the women can fill the race. And it's this difficult thing, isn't it, about there's no point in having a race if there's only 2 or 3 people lining up in it. But actually, if we don't have the race, then people can't see people like them and they can't get involved in the sport, and they're not inspired to get involved in the sport. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword where there aren't enough people racing it, so the race gets taken out so that people can't join the race because there's no race there. So yeah, hopefully the women fill it, and that's another event for the girls that we can keep. But yeah, I guess it is all down to numbers. Like when you get into the higher classifications, the T54s, so people like David Weir or Shelley Woods, they tend to have every event. So they've got the 100, 400, 800, 15, 5K and marathon. And I kind of look at that and think, oh, I'd like a few more events. But yeah, it's an ongoing conversation with the IPC that, you know, the event groups that have higher support needs, so my event would just about fall into that. they need more events, because ultimately the Paralympic Games is for all disabled people. It's not just for the most able. And okay, we might not be the quickest and we might not be the most fascinating to watch. You know, I would much rather watch a T54 men's 1500 because there's probably going to be a crash at some point and it's all very exciting, but ultimately sports for everyone, and we need to replicate that through the programme. So I think the IPC are working really, really hard on doing that and making that more obvious in their programming. But there's always going to be backlash from athletes. We're such difficult people to work with. I'm just so aware of it. We're never happy.
And you had that amazing unbeaten record for so long. So how did it feel after all of that to finally not win a race? I think we had that expectation of you, didn't we? That, oh, Hannah's in the race, you know, she's going to win. So there's that added pressure too. But how did it feel when other athletes coming through?
It felt horrible. It felt like my world had ended. And I genuinely think at the time, like, just crossing that line, it didn't feel that bad. I was just like, okay, this is what happens in athletics. And I was okay with it. It was more other people's reactions that made it horrible. It was Carrie Denigan that finished my unbeaten streak. She was the first girl to beat me in 7 years. And she's actually still the only girl to have ever beaten me in my career. She's beaten me a handful of times. So I guess that's what a rivalry is. But you know what? It made me even more hungry. You know, it made me realise that people were coming through. But at the time, yeah, just crossing that finish line, I was shocked, understandably. But I was like, okay, this is cool. And then just the way people reacted, like people were like, oh, you're rubbish. Oh, like everyone ran over to Carrie and it was this massive celebration and people were literally like not cheering that she'd won, cheering that she'd beaten me, which felt really targeted. It felt more like a hate campaign against me rather than an actual celebration of her achievement. I mean, when it happened, it was literally like a little national event. If she hadn't beaten me, no one would ever have known that race had gone on. But it was in the papers, it was everywhere. And it was all just like really horrible headlines of how, you know, I'd lost my touch and that was my career finished. And, you know, I was probably, how old was I? I was 24. So I was still really young to be getting my head around things like that. And yeah, it was not great. It was not a nice time at all.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Both from a media and a public perspective. I think people like Serena Williams and others, but it's almost when someone's had that such longevity of winning, there is that turning against or wanting to see it overcome in some way rather than keep celebrating the amazing champion and recognising that you're still, you know, incredible in terms of what you're achieving.
Yeah, too. I think it's like I kind of get it, but at the same time, like I think it's a language that's used. It's always so and so has beaten so and so, and the celebration is always the fact that they've beaten the other person rather than the fact that they've just won. Whereas, you know, when I win, it's never Hannah's beaten Carrie. It's always like Hannah's won again. And it's always like, hang on a second. Why do we always make it sound like it's not an achievement? It's a massive achievement. You know, the rivalry's there. She has the potential to beat me in every single race that we line up in. But when she wins, it is this massive like, oh, wow, she's done it. And when I do it, it's like, oh, yeah, she's done it again. That's fine. And sometimes it's frustrating. You know, it's really frustrating because you feel like people aren't recognising the work that actually went into that. People aren't noticing, like, yeah, I trained every day to make that happen. I've based my whole life around wheelchair racing. I've not missed a session. Yeah, it's
really interesting.
I just think the whole narrative, it has to change, and it has to be more supportive of everyone, because ultimately when someone wins, someone doesn't win, and being the person that doesn't win is not a nice place to be. And when you then read the language that's used about you for not winning, it can, it's not great.
And as we discussed at the beginning of the conversation, you've now won kind of everything in terms of medals and championships and constantly setting records too. So what keeps you to keep driving and beating more records? And I guess also what keeps you motivated to keep training so hard day to day?
You know what? I think it's changed a lot through my career, what's motivated me. For a long time, it was just being the best. I loved winning, and I'm not afraid of saying it. It sounds really big-headed. I trained because I loved to win, and I knew that I could win if I kept working the way I was. Then when Carrie beat me, I realised that had to change, because if winning is all that motivates you, then when you don't win, you've got no motivation. So actually going forward for a long time, for a few years, it was beating Carrie. That was my motivation. And it sounds horrible, but like I said, that's a rivalry. That's what sometimes you train for. Then we got to lockdown, obviously in the pandemic, and I suddenly didn't have any races to beat Carrie in. I didn't have any races to win. So actually at that time, if that was my motivation, then I probably would have just stopped pushing. So I realised in that time that actually my motivation is enjoyment. It's finding the bits that I enjoy about my sport, that I train for, and basically taking myself back 10 years. You know, it's taken me back to when I started. Why did I start? I didn't start because I knew that I would win. I didn't start to beat one particular person or a group of girls. I did it because I loved it. So I think in lockdown, I had the opportunity to just move away from programs and timetables, and you know, you have to be ready for this event and you have to then get ready for this and I could just do the sessions that I loved and that I enjoyed. And I made a lot of changes. Carrie beat me again at the 2018 European Championships. So it's the only major title that I've won a silver medal in. It's my only major silver medal. And when I came away from that, I made a lot of changes. So I changed my S&C coach, I changed my chair, I moved house, I moved to Chester, away from Yorkshire, so that I could move club. And I moved club so that I could train with other people. Because up until that point, I trained completely on my own. So for 10 years, I trained every day on my own. And it was a lot. It was hard. The motivation was hard. And it was the best thing that I ever did. Because actually, once I'd found the sessions I enjoyed in lockdown, I then went back to the club and just found that I loved being around other people. I love that I can go to a club and you don't even think about the session that you're doing. You know, I train with mainly a group of men, aside from Samantha Kinghorn. So Sammy also races with KBAC. Sammy's one of my best friends, but we're also very, very close in times. So we just challenge each other every single session. We're always pushing each other to get the best out of each other. We're always racing. And the work that we're doing together is actually helping, you know, wheelchair racing for the women get stronger in Britain, because for so long, it kind of just disappeared a bit. You know, when I started racing, we had so many girls coming through, so many talented young women coming through. And just bit by bit, for whatever reason, they all stopped. They all dropped off. And we went through a real lull. Right now, we appear to be bringing more girls into the sport and actually bringing through quite a talented bunch of girls. So there's myself and Sammy. And then I mentioned Melanie Woods at the beginning of the chat during the Great North Run. Mel's only been pushing 3 years, I think. So she's still relatively new, but she's a T54, Sammy's a T53, I'm a T34. So we're all relatively close in times. And then this year, Eden Rainbow Cooper, who won the Commonwealth Games marathon, she's really come on in her track racing too. So this year it's been fantastic to have four of us really pushing it out on the track in all the British events, really challenging each other, really showing what we can do and testing each other. And I think, the motivation now is just to see what this body can do.
And it was great this summer to see you competing in the Diamond League in Birmingham. How important do you think it is to see parasport integrated in those events in that way?
I think it's so important. And I think the last few years have shown how possible it is as well. So the first integrated event I did was actually the British Championships in 2020. So during the pandemic, British Athletics added the para disciplines to the British Championships for the first time ever. Like during a time when we literally couldn't do anything, we made integration possible, we made inclusion possible. And it just shows that it could have always happened. There was no excuse. Yeah. And it's carried on since then, thankfully. And this year, again, we've seen a massive rise. So we obviously had Birmingham 2022, that was the Commonwealth Games that were integrated. Before that, we had the Birmingham Diamond League integrated. My boyfriend raced in both Zurich and Lausanne Diamond Leagues. They both had a wheelchair race in each. My teammates, some of them went out to the Polish Diamond League, and that was integrated. There was a integrated race in Cork in Ireland, and it's fantastic to see. But why has it taken this long? Why Why did it need a pandemic in the middle and everything else for people to actually to go, oh, you know what? Athletics is just athletics. It doesn't matter if you're in a wheelchair or if you're running. We're all using the same facilities, same officials, same track. And it's so important because it's, you know what, it's giving our sport a new audience that we can reach. So I had a really funny conversation. I coach an athlete, a young athlete. She's called Anya. She's 16. And she raced at the school games this year, which is obviously where I started. And she won the race. And after the race, I was handing out the medals. And she went, oh, yeah, like, look, we're coming through. We're like the three next blondes. And I went, what? Who are the three blondes? And she went, you, Sammy and Mel. And I went, why'd you call us that? And she went, well, you three are blonde, and you're always the best in Britain, so you're the three blondes, and we're not blonde, so we're the three brunettes, and we're going to be the next you. And I was just like, how crazy is it that that's how we're being talked about? Like, now groups of girls in our sport are going, we're going to be the next Hannah, Sammy and Mel. Like, we want to do what they do. We want to go and do that. And I think you really, really lose sight of, you know, the opportunities that maybe we're bringing through for the young girls that are coming through. And it was just fun. It was so funny, but it was fantastic to see that, you know, because they were like, well, you race at the Diamond Leagues and you race at the Paralympics together, and we want to do that. And I'd never really thought about it. So yeah, it's so interesting how important integration is, and how many more people see that and go, yeah, that's what I want to do.
Building on that opportunity to inspire others, I loved your post on International Women's Day last year. If I can just read a little bit of it back to you.
Go for it.
Doing it for the girls that were never encouraged to chase their dreams or never given the right opportunities to do so. Doing it for those that were told it wasn't possible, that they weren't strong enough, determined enough, brave enough, good enough. And doing it to prove so many people wrong. So I really love that. And it's great to see how much and how important it is for you to inspire those young girls of the future, you know, in sport and in parasport too.
You know what, I think for me, I've got to an age now where I realise that I am in a very, very privileged position to make a change. To make a change that women before me haven't had the chance to make, and that can ultimately change the lives of girls that come after me. You know, for girls like the girl that I coach, I can change their life with what I do now. And I think, you know, for a long time, I always had that question thrown at me, like, oh, how does it feel to inspire other people? And I'd always kind of say, oh, I'm not interested in that. I'm doing it because I love it. And I still love it. But actually, the more I love it, the more opportunity I get. And the more opportunity I get, the more I actually get to make sure that that's then embedded in the future. I know that there are still girls out there that are like me, that are being told at a young age that they can't do things, that they'll never do things. I hate the word can't. There's nothing that we can't do. You can do anything and everything that you want to do. We can't do everything, but you can do anything. And I've fallen into that trap a lot, you know, thinking I can do everything. I can be an elite athlete, I can be a TV presenter, I can do this, I can do this. You can't do everything, but you can do absolutely anything in life if you put your mind to it, if you get the right group of people behind you. But you can't do it if you don't have the opportunity. And currently, especially for disabled women, there's just not that much opportunity. So I'm in a place where I can provide it, where I can create it. And yeah, I'm quite mouthy anyway, so I just say what I think, and sometimes people listen.
I'm going to quote you back at yourself again here as well too. But having not wanted to be in your wheelchair as a young girl, you shared such a powerful post on International Day of the Wheelchair, and you said, after years growing up and avoiding one, I hope my life shows people that wheelchairs are nothing but a mobility aid, helping over 110 million people worldwide work hard and achieve their dreams. So clearly it's really important for you to raise that profile for the challenges wheelchair users face. But how important is it in terms of that day-to-day access, in terms of transport and, you know, being out on high streets, just living life really?
Yeah, I think that's more important to me than anything. Because I think people look at us as elite athletes and they go, oh, they don't have the same difficulties as I do day to day. And the thing is, you know, if that shop doesn't have a ramp, then I'm not getting in it just as much as an everyday person isn't getting in it. I haven't got as much as a profile, but I have an opportunity to actually raise that and say this isn't right. And I also want to change the way people see a wheelchair. You know, I know that I was so terrified of it. It had such a negative connotation growing up that I avoided it. And actually, you know, had I not avoided it, how different would my life have been? How much more would I potentially have been able to do? I'll never know the answer to that, but I hate to think that there are people, again, like me out there thinking, oh, I can't be in a wheelchair, it makes me different. Because ultimately, it doesn't. It just makes you more able to do things. I actually did a talk for a company literally the other day. And I did my talk and, I was saying, like, how freeing wheelchair racing was and how it was my independence and my freedom. And then the colleagues had the opportunity to try some wheelchair basketball, actually. And one of the people got in the wheelchair and, like, started pushing and went, oh, how is this freedom? It's horrible. And I kind of went, well, yeah, but the whole point of this is you can't use your legs, so that's freedom. And she was like, oh, no, I couldn't do this. The thing is, we don't get the choice to not do that. You know, I can walk a little bit, so maybe sometimes, I go, I don't want to use my wheelchair today. But there are so many people who don't get the choice to go, oh, this isn't freedom, this is horrible. That's the way we live. And yeah, it's horrible because you built a basketball court on a hill. Of course it's horrible, you were pushing up a hill. But that's the whole point. That's why access and inclusion is so important, because it is horrible when you can't get in a shop. It's horrible when the lift's broken. It's horrible when I have to say I can't go to an event because they don't have access. It's horrible that I have to book in advance to get on a train. It's rubbish. It's not freedom. It's not independence. It's relying on people. And we don't want to do it as much as that lady getting in that wheelchair went, oh, this is horrible. Yeah, it is, because it wasn't perfect. And I think it's little things like that hopefully, when she said that, it made her realise, or it definitely made her workplace realise, oh, this building isn't perfect for disabled people. We can make small adaptations. We can make a difference. And so hopefully I went away and I'd made a difference to make them realise little things that people do every day can actually make the lives of disabled people so much easier and so much more accessible. Because, yeah, I might look like I can do anything when I'm out on that athletics track, but things like small hills and curbs are my kryptonite, and they can stop me actually going anywhere. So, yeah, it's a big fight. It's a fight that I'm never going to win on my own. But if you can light a small light around it and make people maybe think a little bit more about it, then yeah, hopefully it'll make a change. You never know.
And you've obviously travelled around the world more than most average people. But how does wheelchair access for users in the UK vary from other countries?
I'd say it sits steadily in the middle. For example, my older brother lives in Finland. The wheelchair access there is phenomenal. Like, there is not a single shop, a single anything without a ramp, without some way for me to get in. Their tram system, their train system is completely level access so that I could just wheel on and get on. Their buses all have ramps. Honestly, like, flawless. The same with Barcelona. So easy to get around. But then you go to places, I don't know, like America, and they're just like us. You can't really get anywhere. And we are taking steps forward. We are improving in Britain, slowly but surely. But a lot of it is just people's attitude. And I think, for a long time, post 2012, people really changed their mind about disabled people, but almost to a negative effect. And it sounds really weird to say that, but I actually had a strange experience post London. And I was so used to just going down the street and people going like, oh, you're amazing. What you did was fantastic. Well done. And I actually had one disabled lady stop me. And she said, I think what you did was fantastic, but you've made my life hell. And I said, I don't understand how I could have affected your life. And she said, you do realise that now you and your teammates are doing that. I get called a benefits grounder, I get called lazy, I get told that I should be doing that. And suddenly, post-2012, everyone decided that every disabled person could be a Paralympic champion. Oh, if you're not doing sport, you're lazy. Oh, if you're not doing sport, then you need to get a job. And it was like, we don't look at every able-bodied man and go, you could beat Usain Bolt. So why are we suddenly expecting every disabled person to have the ability of a Paralympian? It really shocked me actually when she said it, and it made me feel quite apologetic. But then it made me realise that, yeah, we probably need to make people realise that even though Channel 4 called us superhumans, yeah, we're superhumans when we're on the track, but actually getting around and about, we are just the same as every other person in this country with a disability, and this country doesn't really help us with that.
We hear such positive things about Finland on so many levels, don't we? So what is it? Why have they invested so much? Why are things so good there, do you think?
You know what? I think it's just a much newer country, isn't it? It's everything there is quite new. The technology, they're so forward thinking with it. They're a much smaller population, so they have much more money per head to make things work. There's so many reasons. But you know, I said it's about the attitude of people as well. It's amazing how many, I don't know, buses in London are accessible. But yeah, I have never yet been allowed to get on a bus in London. There was once me and, again, Mel Nichols, the girl that I raced with in London 2012. It was post-London. We were there for a London 2012 celebration, and we went to get on a bus. And he went, no, just one wheelchair. And we went, it's okay. There's 2 wheelchairs, but also 2 people in the wheelchairs, so we can get on. And he was like, nope, you're not getting on. So we made a point and we raced him to every bus stop. Which is very me thing to do, just to make a point. And I beat him to every single one, I'd like to point out. But it's that attitude of, no, you're a wheelchair. I'm not. I'm a human and I'm in a wheelchair. And you have it everywhere. Bus, taxis. So many people go, I know, one wheelchair. And it's so hard. Even like I live with my fiance, he's also a wheelchair user, so it's so difficult. You know, the first few times when we tried to go out together and get on a train even, and they were like, oh no, one wheelchair per space.
Oh my God.
We're like, look, we just want to sit together.
And I'd never even thought about it. So I feel awful that I've never even considered that.
But you wouldn't.
Of course you're going with
because it wouldn't affect you, and I totally get that. But it is like you're constantly referred to as wheelchair. Well, I'm not a wheelchair. I'm a human.
We've also seen you doing more on the TV away from sport. So you were on Celebrity Bake Off, Strictly Come Dancing for Sport Relief, and you also had a stint presenting BBC's Country File too. And you seem such a natural in front of the camera. So is that something that you'd like to do more of?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I love doing things like that. And, you know, I'm always more nervous doing things like that than I am before I line up for a race, because ultimately, like, it's always something different. It's always something I've got to learn. And a lot of the time I'm the first person in a wheelchair to do it. So I was the first wheelchair user on the British Bake Off. So we had to redesign the set so that I could get around it. Myself and Martine were the first wheelchair users on Strictly. So obviously the dancers had to be built around us and we had to get special wheelchairs to do it. So there's always so many things to think about. But I think the amazing thing about being on there is, number one, again, you reach a new audience of people who might be sat at home thinking, there's nothing for me. It really does prove that we can do absolutely anything. But also that we can do anything with the right support. But especially BBC Country File, you know, that was, for me, that was an absolute dream come true. That's like a dream job. And I was doing things that I never ever dreamt that I would get the chance to do. So I herded Highland cattle across a beach in the Outer Hebrides. Just hands down the most incredible day of my life. I was a gamekeeper for a day. I was a dairy farmer for a day. And they're all jobs that you don't think of and go, oh, wheelchair user could do that. But they made it possible. They made it possible for me to be there and to do it. And it absolutely wasn't easy. A lot of them were really hard places to get to and to make it work, but we made it work. I love it. I love just getting the opportunity to go out and then just, I guess, challenging myself in a different way. Because actually on paper, all those different things that I've done, at the start I've gone, oh, I don't think I can do that. And then my mum will go, yeah, but you'll regret it if you don't. Just give it a go. So I'll give it a go, and yeah, almost every time it works, so it's fine.
And hard to believe that Paris 2024 is just 2 years away now, like less than that moving forward, isn't it? But I just wonder, do you ever think about retirement beyond that, or are you just so focused on keep training for next year and competing?
I obviously know that retirement's on the horizon, so I do think about it. I have no idea what I want to do when I retire, though, and people do keep asking me, like, oh, you must be retiring soon. And the thing is, like, for a long time, I thought Tokyo would be my last. 3 seems like a good amount. 3 Paralympic Games. A lot of people seem to do that. And actually, I got there and I was like, I'm not done. I'm not done. So I refuse to kind of put a stamp on it and say, oh, Paris will be my last, or I'd love to get to LA. I think it'll be a push, but you might see me there. And that's the thing. Like, as long as I'm enjoying it, I'll keep doing it. But there's always one eye on the future. There's always one eye on what happens when all this ends, because it is going to end. There's going to be an end to this, unfortunately. It's kind of scary. You know, I've been doing this since I was 15. I've been on British Athletics UK sport funding since I was 16. I've ultimately never had a real job. And the thought of a real job really, really terrifies me, because I'll be like an intern. I'll have no idea. I'll have no experience. I'll have nothing. So I need to do this for as long as possible. And I'll worry about that. But TV is a dream. I'd love to go into that. I did my coaching exams last year leading into this year. So I'm a registered coach now. So that's always an option. And I think just the whole time I'm competing, I'm trying to build up the options that I can then move into, because I don't think I'll ever stick to one thing. I like to try everything and absolutely anything.
How amazing is Hannah? I can't wait to hear all she goes on to achieve. Head over to fearlesswomen.co.uk to find out more about all of the game changers I've spoken to for the podcast. Other incredible para-athletes I've had the privilege to talk to include Sarah Story, Tanni Gray-Thompson, Sophie Carrigill, Anne Wafula-Strike, Pippa Britton and Lauren Steadman. As well as listening to all the podcasts on the website, you can also find out more about The Collective, a free community network for all women working in sport. You can also sign up for the Fearless Women newsletter, which highlights the developments in women's sport, and there's more about my book, Game On, The Unstoppable Rise of Women's Sport. Thanks again to Sport England for backing the Game Changers through the National Lottery, and to Sam Walker, who does such a great job as our executive producer. Finally, thanks to my brilliant colleague Kate Hannon, who does so much behind the scenes at Fearless Women. Do come and say hello on social media, where you'll find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram and Facebook at Sue Anstis. And if you have a couple of moments, it'd be wonderful if you could leave a review or rating for the podcast, as it really does make a big difference in helping us to reach new audiences. The Game Changers. Fearless Women in Sport.